Alright guys, we have a brand new event. It is that time of the month. We finally get to take a nice break from regular ladder. We have two choices here. We have the light and dark event. These are the two strongest archetypes in the entire game. I think we did a tier list at one point about the different archetypes on the channel. Not the different archetypes, the different attributes on the channel. Yes, you get to pick light or dark. Whatever you pick, that is the only thing you can play. So you can't play like a deck that's half light, half dark, which is honestly a little contrary because they just released the chaos cards in the pack, and then on top of that they just released the Kashtira cards, which are earth. But completely contrary to what they just released, this is the event we have. I'm going to show you the best decks you can play. Alright, one of the very first decks that you can play, not surprising at all, is Labrynth. Labrynth is the best trap deck in the game right now. It is better than Eldritch at this point because the problem with Eldritch is just it loses very hard to the Bystials, it loses very hard to Call by the Grave, it just loses very hard to a lot of different cards. Like anything that interrupts the graveyard will kill essentially the Eldritch deck, whereas this deck is significantly more resilient. This deck did sustain some hits because it did lose the Lady Labrynth is limited to 1 in this event, and the Big Welcome Labrynth is limited to 1 in this event. But other than that, the deck is essentially a full power. So if you really think about it, the deck is essentially what it was before the new cards came out, but now you get to play one of each of the new cards, and on top of that you have Chaos Angel, which makes this deck absolutely insane because this is like the deck's new boss monster. When you summon this, you essentially get a monster that is, you get to banish, and then monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle. So it's essentially like a free boss monster that you can summon every single time. You get to summon these using the Silver Castle. Basically you've got the level 2 and then you've got the level 8, so then you can basically summon. It's actually really easy to summon. Yeah, as long as you just have these monsters. Yeah, you can treat one light or dark monster as a tuner. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. This card is crazy, and this deck is really crazy. The best control deck in the entire event. Well, the best trap deck in the event. Let me not get myself carried away here, but the best trap deck in the event by far. Definitely something worth considering. Alright, deck number 2, just to continue this, just to continue the darks here, we've got Dark World. Dark World is an insane deck, and the only thing that really ever holds this deck back is Max C. Now, sometimes when you get Max C, you can actually just continue to play, and then you can deck your opponent out, but the problem is that's not always consistent, and sometimes they draw Nibiru, sometimes they draw more hand traps, and you just end up losing. In this event, there's no Max C because Max C is Earth. So you get to play essentially Dark World at full power. Yes, you're missing a few extra deck options like Saryuja, but at the end of the day, you still get to do everything that you want to do. You get to summon the Grapha Overlord, you get to spam... you get to spam link monsters. Like, you still get to do everything that you would have wanted to do in a regular Dark World deck, and now it's at full power. For some weird reason, the only danger they hit was Danger Mothman. Why Danger Mothman? I don't even know. I'm probably actually going to add Gizmek Orochi just to have an additional boss monster. There's probably a few things. You can add Chaos Dragon Lavinier because you can banish just darks. Like, there's a lot of cool things that you can add to this deck. This list isn't super optimized, but this is definitely one of the decks that I would consider playing. Yeah, it's a really solid deck, and there's some new cards that are good, like in the last set, the Diabolica. This is a new card that came out, pretty good in the deck. If you haven't tried it, definitely give it a try. But yeah, Dark World is another deck you might want to considering the fact that Max C is essentially non-existent Max C is essentially non-existent in this event, so it's pretty cool to have. Alright, next up we've got a light deck. This is EXO Sisters. EXO Sisters is a deck that essentially, if somebody touches the graveyard, the Exo Sisters begin to perform. The deck is very strong. It's good going first or going second. Honestly, it basically summons XYZ monsters. The only card that got hit is Exosister Pax, which is their main like starter, but I mean, that's not really the end of the world because they still have Martha, and Martha is the best card in the archetype. So as long as they've got Martha, they can play. The deck banishes like 15 cards every single turn. It's actually kind of amazing. All of their extra deck is light. All of their main deck is light. Essentially, the entire deck is all light. They have access to Zeus since they're a light archetype, and they have access to things like Evil Swarm, Exoton Knight, in case you're playing against Labrynth. So the deck has a lot of really, really good options going first or going second. The only card, literally the only card that got hit is Exosister packs and the Prosperity. Other than that, the deck is essentially at 100% full power. It's actually kind of crazy. Yeah, a very, very strong deck. Basically a very powerful anti-graveyard deck. So if you're playing against Dark World, or you're playing against decks that use the graveyard, like for example, Blue Eyes is on the cover of this event. If Blue Eyes is very heavily played, which I imagine a lot of casual players will play Blue Eyes, this is a very, very, very good counter to Blue Eyes. Alright, next up, this is a kind of a sleeper deck. I don't see a lot of people talking about this deck at all. This is actually the Dogmatica Ritual deck. A lot of people play, obviously, Dogmatica Shaddoll. They play a lot of the branded cards, obviously with branded. But Dogmatica actually does have ritual monsters, and they're quite good, especially this one, Albazoa. This dude is insane. It makes your opponent send a bunch of cards to the graveyard. It can't be... basically, it's unaffected by the activated effects of Fusion, Synchro, XYZ, and Link monsters. Your opponent basically can't out it with any of those monsters. It has 4,000 attack, so they have to out it with something different, and it makes your opponent get rid of a bunch of cards from their extra deck, or you can make your opponent return all of these monsters that they have back to the extra deck. It's actually kind of a crazy boss monsters. Again, it's 4,000 attack. If you wanted to, you can actually mix this deck and play it with Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon if you wanted to, and that's always a pretty interesting deck because it's just extremely easy to get to all of that. The deck, again, is quite resilient, quite strong, and the good thing about the extra deck options is that you have access to things like Natis, since it's a light monster, and you have access to Herald of the Arclight, which is, again, a light monster, because you can send it to the graveyard, and then you could get additional searches. You can send off Diviner, you can send it off the Nadir Servant, and then you can get your searches. And then, of course, you have some other stuff that you have access to here. But yeah, the deck is actually very cool. Like I said, it's basically an anti-extra deck, and a lot of the other decks in this event are going to be using the extra deck, with the exception of maybe Labrynth. Other than that, basically every other deck is definitely using the extra deck. So really, really cool option to play. It's essentially at 100% full power. The only thing you're missing is... that monster, I forget its name, but basically you can summon it to your opponent's board, and then they're locked into Link monsters. I believe it's called Ib. Basically, that's the only card you're possibly missing. Other than that, the deck is at 100% full power. Definitely a deck worth considering. Alright, next up, we've got the ABC Dragon deck, the ABC Buster Dragon deck. This is a really, really, really strong deck, especially in the context of this event, because this deck is essentially, again, it's at full power. And I wouldn't call it a budget deck because it has a lot of SRs in the main deck, but if we're being honest here, if you have a lot of SR dust, which if you've been playing the game essentially since the beginning, you probably have a lot of SR dust. Like, yeah, it doesn't seem like I have much, but if I started decrafting things, I would have plenty of SR dust. The only thing you really need are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in archetype URs. Other than that, everything else is SR. So it just is kind of incredible. It's all staples and SRs in the main deck. So if you always wanted to craft this deck anyway, it might actually be nice to craft. ABCs are a cool fusion deck that doesn't actually have to main deck things like... they don't actually have to main deck things like Polymerization, because there are a bunch of contact fusions. They contact fuse out of the graveyard to make Buster Dragon, and Buster Dragon is their boss monster. This card is really, really strong. It can tag itself out. It can discard to banish a card. And again, it doesn't require you to actually use Polymerization. It doesn't actually require you to do any of the classic Union summoning effects. You can just banish them out of the graveyard, special summon it, and then if you want them back, you can just tribute this and then special summon the cards that you banished. It's actually quite incredible. It also is very good. Every single time one of these ABC pieces goes from field to graveyard, you get an addition, you get an effect, which means they work very well with Link monsters, and they work very well, not with Exceed monsters, but Exceed monsters that allow you to go into Zeus. Zeus should be here. I don't know why he's not, because he is a light monster, so he should definitely... Oh, he's right there, yeah. Yeah, so basically the deck is very, very good. It works well with Links. It works well with Exceeds. You can make Cyber Dragon Infinity. You can make Buster Dragon. Ancient Fairy Dragon you can make by using Ghost Ogre plus any of the pieces. And then This card is just really, really good in the deck. I almost want to maybe play Emergency Teleport just to summon out Ghost Ogre. But yeah, this is another deck that's just, it finally gets a chance to shine because it's a very, very, very strong, essentially pure light deck. Alright, next up we've got Blackwings. This is actually probably the most budget friendly of the decks. The structure deck is available. All it costs is 1,500 gems, right? Because you buy 3 structure decks. And honestly, I think it's a pretty good deal. You just buy 3 structure decks, 1,500 gems. You're going to earn 3,100 gems back in the course of this event. So that's essentially double what you invest into the deck, and you get pretty much this deck, which is the Blackwing deck. This deck combos off super duper well. It's just a really, really powerful deck. You can go into the Blackwing Dragon. You have access to cool trap cards that you can activate during your turn. You can burn your opponent. You can easily finish them off. They have a really cool boss monster, which I'm about to get to in a second, which is the Blackwing Full Armor Master. This card is a really, really, really good boss monster. It's unaffected by other card effects. It steals a monster. Like this is a really, really, really strong card. And then of course you've got the Blackwing Assault Dragon, which again you get from the structure deck, and you have access to the new card, which is Chaos Angel, which is a new card that's very, very easy to summon in this particular deck. This is probably the most budget friendly deck, because again, you just buy 3 structure decks and you essentially have everything that I'm showing you here. There is a bit of a learning curve that you kind of need to there's a bit of a learning curve to this deck. It's not the easiest deck in the world to play. You do have to be somewhat intelligent. If you're not, this may not be the deck for you. But another deck that is similar to this that I'm not going to showcase is Raidraptors. You could play Raidraptors slash Raidraptors mixed with Phantom Knights. That's also a decent deck. It's also a Wing Beast deck. So that is, I just wanted to give like a side shout out, so that could be an option available to you. Alright, the last deck I'm going to be showing you guys is Galaxy Eyes. I actually think Galaxy Eyes is better for this event than Blue Eyes. Blue Eyes needs a Dictator of D if you're playing pure Blue Eyes, and on top of that, a lot of the extra deck monsters tend to be like a mix of lights and darks, and it can be a little bit of an issue not to be able to play lights and darks in the deck. But I do think that Galaxy is actually quite strong because it's a 100% light, pure light extra, like pure light deck and extra deck, which is really cool. The one thing that sucks is that the new support is actually missing because it came out in the TCG recently and it came out in the OCG quite a long time ago. I'm going to say it came out in the TCG like 3-4 months ago. So it would be cool if that stuff was in here, but unfortunately it's not here. But I mean, this is the deck essentially at 100% full power, which is pretty cool. You can combo off all you want. You can go second as always because the deck is really good at going second. And I'm actually shocked at how much of this deck I actually own. I only need to craft like maybe one of these, and one of these, and I pretty much have the deck here because the rest of it is all SRs. I might actually give this deck a go because I have not played this deck in a couple of years, which is kind of cool. But yes, this is all of the decks that I have available to you. Well, this is all the decks that I think are very good in the event. If there's anything that I missed, please let me know because obviously there's just so many decks in the game, and I'm always bound to miss something, especially when I'm making these videos at 3 o'clock in the morning. But if you enjoyed this video and it helped you in any way in the event, leave a like, and thank you for watching. La, 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 la.